The last piece of hope. The wind howled through the shattered alleys of Varela 9, a forgotten planet on the edge of the galaxy. Once, this place had been a thriving colony filled with light, laughter, and trade, but now it was nothing more than ruins and shadows. Amid those ruins, a fragile alien woman named Lyra wrapped her thin arms around her small child, Yellow, trying to shield him from the biting cold. Lyra's species, the Serenai, were once proud healers of the galaxy, gentle beings with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. But war and famine had turned them into beggars. Lyra had already sold everything, her tools, her home crystal, even her marriage bracelet, to feed Yellow for one more day. Now only one thing remained, a small carved pendant made by her late husband before the bombs fell. As the twin moons rose, Lyra looked at the pendant resting in her palm, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she didn't care. Elo's breathing had become weak, faint, like the last flicker of a dying flame. She whispered softly, "Hold on, my star. Mama will find food." She walked through the dark marketplace where shadows traded despair for scraps. The scent of rust, smoke, and sorrow filled the air. Merchants sneered at her alien form, her torn robes, her trembling hands. One of them laughed. "A Serenai begging for food? Go back to your dust, Shimmerskin." She lowered her head, humiliated but determined. She showed the pendant, her last belonging. "Please, just a little food for my child." Most turned away, some mocked, but one man stopped. A tall figure in a heavy coat, face hidden under the glow of his visor. His voice was steady, deep, and unmistakably human. "How much do you need?" he asked. She blinked, startled. "Just enough to keep him alive." Without a word, the human took off his glove and revealed his hand. Warm, real. He reached into his coat and pulled out a ration pack and a thermal blanket. "Take these," he said, "and keep your pendant." Lyra froze, unsure if it was a trick. Why would you help me?" she whispered. The human's eyes, now visible under the visor's fading light, were calm but filled with something rare, compassion. "Because no child deserves to starve," he said simply. Then he turned to leave, but Elo's faint cough made him pause. He looked back at the small child shivering in the cold. "Come with me," he said finally. "I have shelter nearby." Lyra hesitated, fear battling hope inside her. Humans were known as warriors, powerful and ruthless. Yet this one's voice carried no cruelty, only quiet strength. She followed him through the rain-soaked ruins until they reached an old cargo base. Inside, warm light glowed, and the air smelled of cooked food, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Yellow stirred weakly in her arms, his eyes fluttering open. "Mom, is it safe?" he murmured. She smiled faintly. "Yes, my love, I think it finally is." The human knelt beside a small heater and handed her a cup of steaming broth. "Name's Captain Reed," he said, "former Alliance medic." Lyra looked at him with disbelief. "A human medic? Helping a Serenai?" He nodded. "Once, your people saved mine on Mars' frontier. I'm just returning a debt." Tears rolled down her cheeks as Yellow began to drink the broth slowly, color returning to his face. Reed watched quietly, saying nothing. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Outside, beyond the cracked walls, distant drones scanned the streets, searching for refugees. And somewhere high above, the Dominion fleet prepared for another purge. Lyra didn't know yet, but fate had just shifted. The act of kindness from one human would soon ignite a chain of events that could change the entire galaxy. The shelter of a stranger. For the first time in months, Lyra slept without fear. The small hum of the heater, the faint crackle of rain on the steel roof, and the gentle breathing of her son felt like a lullaby she had long forgotten. But peace, in a world like this, was never meant to last. When she woke, Captain Reed was already outside, his figure faint through the frosted glass, working on a broken transmitter. Yellow slept beside her, wrapped in the human's spare jacket, his small chest rising with steady rhythm. For the first time, warmth touched his pale blue skin. Lyra sat quietly, watching the human, confused by his kindness. Humans were feared across sectors, fighters, colonizers, survivors, but not caretakers. Yet this one offered food, safety, and silence. Reed returned, wiping his hands on his sleeve, his expression thoughtful. Signals dead, he muttered. Dominions jamming every channel again. Lyra frowned softly. They hunt us still? He nodded. They hunt anyone without allegiance, especially the Serenai. His voice was calm, but there was a shadow in his tone, something heavy, buried deep. He handed her a small device. Keep this close, it masks heat signatures. If patrol drones sweep the area, they won't see you. She accepted it carefully, her silver fingers trembling. Why are you helping me, Captain? Reed didn't answer at first, his gaze distant. Finally, he said, because once, a Serenai saved my sister during the siege of Callus Prime. I owe a life debt, and I don't like debts. The sound of distant engines cut through the quiet. Lyra tensed, clutching Yellow close. Reed moved to the window and peered through a small crack, his jaw tightening. Recon units, he whispered. They're scanning the lower sectors again. He turned to her quickly. Grab the child. Stay silent. We go underground. They hurried through the narrow corridor beneath the cargo base. The tunnels were damp, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Each echo of boots above sent shivers through Lyra's spine. Elo's small hand clung to hers as she followed the human's silhouette deeper into the darkness. After several turns, Reed stopped near a sealed hatch, typing a code into a rusted panel. It hissed open, revealing a hidden bunker filled with old supplies, maps, and glowing terminals. Lyra stared in disbelief. You live here? Reed shook his head. No. This was an old resistance shelter. I just keep it running. He motioned toward a worn chair. Sit. You and the boy need rest. She hesitated. You fight them, don't you? Reed looked at her with quiet eyes. I try to protect what's left. He pulled up a holographic display showing scattered dots across the planetary map. Every week they sweep another block, taking anyone not registered with the Dominion. He sighed. Soon, they'll find this sector too. Lyra's voice trembled. Then, where can we go? Reed turned off the screen and faced her. There's a shuttle bay near the cliffs, still operational if we can reach it. It's dangerous, but I can get you and your son off this planet. Her heart raced, torn between fear and hope. You'd risk your life for us? Reed smirked faintly. I already did when I opened that door. Before she could respond, a sudden blast shook the ground, dust falling from the ceiling. Yellow woke, crying in panic. Reed grabbed his rifle, scanning the sensors. They found the base move. He tossed Lyra a small datapad glowing with coordinates. Head through the western passage, follow the blue markers, it leads to the cliffs. She looked at him, terrified. What about you? I'll slow them down, he said firmly. Go, Lyra. But she didn't move. Her instincts screamed to run, yet her heart refused to leave. She looked at the human, this stranger who'd given her hope, and something inside her changed. Captain, she whispered, if you fall, my child loses his future. I won't let that happen. She turned, her eyes glowing faintly with the old Serenai light, a forgotten gift of her kind. She raised her hands, and a soft silver field began to shimmer around them. Reed looked in surprise. Is that energy shielding? Lyra nodded, breathing heavily. It won't last long, but it'll buy us time. Outside, explosions echoed as drones swarmed the sector. Together, the human and the alien woman ran through the collapsing tunnels. Side by side, carrying the last fragment of kindness left in a dying world. And in that chaos, amid fire and ruin, a bond stronger than blood began to form. A bond that would one day challenge an empire. The fire beneath the stars. The night sky above Varela 9 burned with crimson light. Drones streaked through the clouds like metal comets, their engines howling across the dying city. Below, in the maze of tunnels, Lyra, Yellow, and Captain Reed ran through the dim corridors, chased by echoes of war. The air was thick with dust and static, each step crunching over broken glass and fallen cables. Yellow clung to his mother's arm, his small body trembling with exhaustion. Reed led the way, his rifle slung over his shoulder, scanning each junction. He had been through too many evacuations to count, but never one that mattered this much. After what felt like hours, they reached a half-collapsed tunnel that opened into the surface. Moonlight poured through cracks in the metal, cold and pure. Beyond that light lay the cliffside, and somewhere below, the shuttle bay. Their last chance of escape. Reed knelt and checked the datapad. We're close, he whispered. Just a kilometer more. But Lyra wasn't listening. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, where fire bloomed in the distance. Dominion dropships descending like vultures. They're sealing the sector, she said softly, panic rising in her voice. Reed clenched his jaw. Then we move now. They pushed through the rubble, every breath a struggle. Lyra's legs ached, her body frail from weeks of hunger, but she refused to stop. Yellow stumbled, coughing. Reed scooped him up without a word, carrying him as if he weighed nothing. The boy looked at the human with wide, glowing eyes. Why are you helping us? He asked faintly. Reed smiled under his breath. Because I can. They emerged into the open air, wind tearing at their clothes. The cliffs stretched ahead, jagged and steep, the ocean below black as glass. Lightning crackled over the sea, illuminating the faint outline of a shuttle bay clinging to the rocks. It was there, small, rusted but real. Then came the sound they feared most. The high-pitched whine of drones closing in. Reed turned, scanning the skies. 3 units inbound, heavy class. He dropped to one knee, adjusting the rifle's scope. Keep moving, he shouted. Don't stop. Lyra ran, clutching Yellow tight, her heart pounding like thunder. The drones fired beams of plasma, scorching the ground around them. Chunks of rock exploded, debris slicing through the air. Reed fired back, one shot, then another, precise and deliberate. 2 drones spiraled out of control, crashing into the cliffs with fiery bursts. But the third was faster, larger, armored, relentless. It locked onto them, preparing to fire again. Before Reed could react, a strange vibration filled the air. Lyra looked down, startled. Elo's small hands were glowing, faint silver threads swirling around his fingers. Yellow, she whispered in shock. The boy's eyes glowed bright white, and in an instant, a pulse of light erupted from his chest. The energy wave struck the drone midair, twisting it violently before shattering it to pieces. Silence followed. A silence so deep it felt unreal. Reed lowered his weapon slowly, staring at the child in disbelief. What was that? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Lyra's face was pale. I don't know, she whispered. It shouldn't be possible. Not anymore. She remembered the old stories, the lost gift of the Serenai. A power born from pure emotion, long thought extinct. But her son, half-starved, half asleep, had just awakened it. Yellow collapsed in her arms, breathing shallow, the glow fading from his skin. Reed knelt beside them, checking his vitals. He's alive, just drained. He looked at Lyra, his expression serious. Whatever that was, they'll sense it. Dominion scanners will pick it up in minutes. Lyra's heart sank. Then we must reach the shuttle before they do. They hurried down the path toward the bay, the roar of engines and crashing waves mixing in the night air. When they finally reached the metal gate, it was half buried under debris. Reed set Yellow down gently and began forcing the gate open with a crowbar. Lyra helped, her hands shaking but determined. The door creaked, and the old hangar came into view, a forgotten place filled with dust-covered machines. In the center stood a small transport ship, its hull marked with faded Alliance symbols. Reed grinned faintly. She'll fly, he said, if we can power her up. Lyra placed Yellow inside the ship, covering him with a blanket. She looked back at Reed. You've risked everything. He smirked. I've done worse for less. But before either could move, a voice echoed through the hangar, cold and metallic. Unauthorized life forms detected. A Dominion mech dropped from the sky, landing with a quake that shook the ground. Its red sensors scanned the room, locking onto them instantly. Reed raised his rifle, whispering to Lyra, get the engine online. She ran to the control console, her hands flying over the buttons, praying the systems would respond. The mech's cannon began to charge, red light flooding the walls. Yellow stirred faintly in his sleep, a whisper escaping his lips. Mom, don't be scared. Reed stood his ground as the blast fired. The world lit up in blinding light. And in that flash, everything changed. The child of light. When the light faded, silence swallowed the world. Dust drifted through the air like ash, glowing faintly in the remains of the blast. The mech was gone. Its armored shell melted into slag, its sensors dim and dead. In its place stood a trembling figure, tiny and fragile, yet surrounded by a faint halo of silver light. Yellow, the child who moments ago lay unconscious, was standing, eyes glowing white. His small hands trembled as trails of energy spiraled around him. The heat scorched the floor where he stood, but his face was calm, peaceful even. Lyra gasped and rushed toward him, her heart pounding. Yellow, stop please. The boy blinked, and the glow dimmed. He fell into her arms, weak and shaking, his energy spent. Reed, half blinded by the blast, staggered to his feet, rifle still raised. What in the name of Earth was that? He muttered. Lyra held her son close, tears streaking her silver cheeks. I don't know, but it's not the first time I've seen it. Reed turned sharply. What do you mean? She hesitated, her gaze distant. Before the war, the Serenai had a legend about the starborn, children born once in 1,000 cycles, carrying the essence of pure creation. They said such children could heal worlds or destroy them. She looked at Yellow, sleeping peacefully again. I thought those were just stories. Reed frowned, checking the radar on his wrist console. They're not stories anymore, and now every Dominion scanner in orbit has felt that pulse. He glanced toward the sky where crimson lights shimmered faintly, enemy signals closing fast. We need to move. Now. Lyra helped him drag supplies onto the ship, her hands trembling as alarms blared through the hangar. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life, filling the air with a deep metallic hum. Reed ran to the cockpit, flipping switches and muttering under his breath. Come on, old girl, don't quit on me now. The floor trembled as explosions echoed above. Dominion reinforcements had arrived. Lyra secured Yellow into a safety harness, whispering softly, Hold on, my star. We're almost free. The ship's thrusters screamed as it lifted off the ground. Outside, searchlights cut through the storm, drones swarming like locusts. Reed's voice came over the comm, steady but strained. Brace yourselves. He slammed the throttle, and the ship shot forward, smashing through the collapsing hangar doors. Fire and debris rained behind them as they burst into the open sky. The black ocean stretched below, stars gleaming above, freedom just beyond reach. But Dominion ships were faster. 2 interceptors locked onto them, plasma cannons heating up. Reed weaved through the storm, lightning flashing around them. Hold tight, he shouted as one blast narrowly missed the hull, shaking the ship violently. Panels sparked, alarms screamed, the cabin filled with smoke. Lyra clutched Yellow tightly, whispering prayers from her forgotten homeworld. Reed cursed under his breath. They've got a lock. He slammed a control panel open, revealing a glowing blue chip. What is that? Lyra shouted over the noise. Alliance warp key. Experimental, unstable, he said grimly. It'll either save us or tear us apart. Do it, she said without hesitation. He inserted the chip, and for a moment, the world froze. Then the stars stretched into ribbons of light, space bending and folding around them. The ship groaned under the pressure, metal screeching, glass cracking. Yellow stirred again, his small hand glowing faintly, touching the nearest control panel. And suddenly, the ship stabilized. The warp tunnel flared bright and smooth, as if guided by unseen hands. Reed's eyes widened. He's controlling it, he whispered in disbelief. Lyra looked down at her son, tears glimmering. He's saving us. Moments later, they burst out of hyperspace, silence returning once more. Only distant stars surrounded them now, cold and endless. Reed exhaled slowly, slumping in his seat. We made it, barely. Lyra gazed through the viewport, her reflection shimmering against the galaxy. Where are we? She asked softly. Reed checked his console, far from Dominion space, near the old border colonies, uncharted region. He looked at her, serious now. But listen, they won't stop, Lyra. What your son did. Every scanner within 50 light-years saw it. They'll hunt him. Lyra held Yellow's sleeping form close, her voice trembling. Then I'll protect him, no matter what it takes. Reed nodded slowly. You won't have to do it alone. Outside, a faint glimmer appeared in the darkness, an old Alliance outpost orbiting a dying moon. Reed smiled faintly. Looks like we've got somewhere to rest. But even as they approached, none of them saw the shadow moving in the void beyond. A Dominion hunter drone, silent and cloaked, following their trail. The war was far from over. and the Child of Light had just become the galaxy's most wanted soul. The forgotten outpost. The ship drifted through the void like a wounded bird, its engines hissing softly in the silence of space. Outside, the dead moon loomed closer, its surface cracked and pitted, reflecting the pale light of distant stars. Captain Reed steadied the controls, his eyes tired but sharp. "There it is," he murmured. "Outpost Theta 9. Abandoned 30 years ago. At least, that's what the records say." Lyra stood behind him, holding Yellow in her arms, the child still weak, but breathing steadily. His skin no longer glowed, though faint traces of silver shimmered beneath the surface. "Will it be safe?" she asked quietly. Reed exhaled. "Safe enough to breathe and think. Nothing in this sector works anymore. Dominion burned it all during the purges." As they descended, the moon's gray dust swirled around the landing pads of the old station. Massive metal towers rose like broken bones from the surface. The hangar bay doors opened sluggishly as the ship approached. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Rusted ships, flickering lights, the smell of stale air. Reed powered down the engines, listening to the hum fade. "Welcome to nowhere," he said dryly. Lyra managed a faint smile. Nowhere sounds better than being hunted. They stepped into the outpost, their boots echoing across the metal floor. Dust covered every surface, and holographic screens flickered weakly as if remembering old ghosts. Yellow stirred slightly, his small hand reaching toward one of the terminals. When his fingers brushed the surface, the screen suddenly came alive, glowing bright blue. Reed jumped, startled. "How the hell?" Lines of alien text scrolled across the monitors, shifting into readable form. "Alliance Research Division," Reed read aloud. "Project Echo." He frowned, scrolling through the files. This place wasn't just a supply post, it was a lab. Lyra's voice trembled. "A lab for what?" He opened a file, and a hollow projection flickered into life. A recording of a scientist in an old Alliance uniform. "Log Entry 47. The voice said, distorted by time. Subject Alpha displays spontaneous energy release similar to Serenai core resonance. Tests confirm cross-species energy fusion is possible. The potential for weaponization is enormous." Lyra's eyes widened in horror. "They experimented on Serenai?" Reed nodded grimly. "And on humans too, it seems." The log continued. "After exposure to joint energy fields, subjects show unpredictable bursts of creation energy. Infants born from cross-gene samples exhibit uncontrollable power, capable of disrupting molecular bonds." The hologram flickered and ended abruptly. Lyra stepped back, clutching Yellow protectively. "My son," she whispered. "He's what they were trying to create." Reed's face hardened. The Dominion must have found out. That's why they're exterminating both species. No one wants a weapon they can't control. He looked at Yellow, then at Lyra. "But your child? He wasn't made in a lab. He was born free. That's the difference." Before she could answer, the lights dimmed suddenly. A cold mechanical voice echoed through the hall. "Unauthorized access detected. Defense protocol engaged." Reed cursed, drawing his weapon. Of course there's always a catch. The floor trembled as panels opened, and 3 security drones floated out, their red sensors locking onto them. "Run!" Reed shouted, firing at the nearest drone. Bolts of plasma filled the air, sparks flying as one unit exploded. Lyra shielded Yellow behind a metal crate, whispering ancient Serenai words under her breath. A faint glow surrounded them, a weak energy field born from instinct. Reed rolled behind cover, returning fire, his movements sharp and precise. But there were too many, and his rifle overheated. Then, just as one drone prepared to strike, Elo's eyes snapped open, glowing once more. A pulse of light radiated outward, freezing the machine's midair. Their circuits sparked violently before collapsing in silence. Lyra looked at her son, tears glistening. "Yellow, stop. You'll hurt yourself." He looked up weakly, his voice faint. "They were going to hurt you." Reed exhaled, lowering his rifle. "Remind me never to make him angry." The outpost fell quiet again, save for the low hum of dying power. Reed knelt beside one of the destroyed drones, pulling out a half-burned chip. "This isn't just old tech," he muttered. "It's broadcasting coordinates." He stood quickly, eyes narrowing. Someone knows we're here. Lyra's blood ran cold. The Dominion? He nodded grimly. And they're coming. She looked around desperately. Then we need to leave now. Reed shook his head. Not yet. There's something here, something they don't want us to find. He turned back to the console and typed a command. A hidden chamber opened behind the main wall, glowing faintly with golden light. Inside, a cryopod stood upright, frost covering its surface. Reed brushed away the ice and froze. Inside the pod lay a Serenai woman, alive, her silver skin uniged, her face peaceful. A plaque beneath it read, Dr. Saris Velan, Project Echo Director. Lyra gasped. That's impossible. Saris Velan vanished before the war. Reed stared at the pod, realization dawning in his eyes. She didn't vanish, he said quietly. She hid. Outside the outpost, space shimmered faintly, shadows of Dominion ships closing in. The clock was ticking, and whatever secret this place held was about to be buried forever. The awakening. The cryopod hissed softly, releasing a thin veil of mist that curled around the chamber like ghostly smoke. Reed stepped closer, his hand hovering above the control panel, the blue lights reflecting off his tired eyes. Lyra clutched Yellow tightly, her heart racing. Captain, are you sure this is safe? Reed didn't answer, his gaze locked on the faint heartbeat monitor still pulsing inside the pod. She's alive, he murmured, after all these years. He pressed a sequence of buttons, and the pod began to thaw, steam rising as ancient machinery woke from slumber. Slowly, the glass slid open, revealing the Serenai woman inside, her silver skin glowing softly in the dim light. Her eyes fluttered open, two pools of luminous blue, and she gasped, drawing her first breath in decades. Lyra stepped back in awe. Dr. Saris Velan. The woman's gaze turned toward her, confused but alert. Who are you? Reed lowered his weapon. Captain Reed, Alliance Remnant, he said. You've been asleep a long time, Doctor. She sat up slowly, her movements graceful yet heavy with exhaustion. How long? 31 standard years, Reed replied. Saris blinked, her expression darkening. Then it's true. The Dominion won. Her voice was calm, but laced with sorrow. She looked at Lyra and Yellow, her eyes softening when she saw the child. Is that? Lyra nodded. My son, Yellow. Saris reached out, her fingers trembling slightly. He radiates energy. Serenai essence. But not just that. There's something else. Reed folded his arms. Human, he said quietly. His father was human, wasn't he? Lyra's voice broke. Yes. A soldier named Kale. He died before Yellow was born. Saris nodded slowly. Then your child is what we feared and hoped for. Reed frowned. You're going to have to explain that. Saris stood, weak but steady, her presence commanding. Before the war, I led Project Echo. We sought balance between species, harmony through shared energy. But the Dominion turned it into something darker. They wanted hybrids, living weapons born of both worlds. She looked at Yellow, her eyes filled with regret. Your son, child of Serenai light and human will, represents what they could never replicate, the perfect fusion. Pure emotion turned into energy, unfiltered, unbound. Lyra's voice trembled. You mean he's what they were trying to build? Saris nodded. Yes, and that's why they'll never stop hunting him. To them, he's not a child. He's the future of power. Suddenly, the outpost shuddered violently, alarms blaring through the corridors. Reed checked his wrist monitor. They found us. Dominion dropships entering atmosphere. Saris turned sharply. Then we don't have much time. She moved to the control console, fingers flying across the interface with surprising speed. Holographic schematics lit up, showing tunnels beneath the base. There's an escape route through the reactor vents. It leads to a forgotten hangar. Reed raised an eyebrow. Convenient. Saris gave a faint smile. I designed this place to survive the Dominion's first invasion. Never thought I'd need it myself. Lyra shifted Yellow in her arms, his breathing shallow but steady. Reed glanced at her. Can you move? She nodded firmly. For him, I can do anything. The floor shook again, metal groaning under bombardment. Dust fell from the ceiling as distant explosions echoed through the base. Go, Reed shouted, leading the way through a narrow corridor lit by flashing red lights. Saris followed close behind, carrying a small data core she had pulled from the console. Lyra ran after them, clutching her son close, her heart pounding. They reached the lower tunnels, the heat rising from deep within. Pipes hissed, steam filled the air, and the walls vibrated with the rhythm of the failing reactor. Reed stopped at a junction, checking his scanner. 3 life signatures ahead, not ours. Before he could finish, a plasma bolt shot past his head, burning into the wall. Dominion soldiers, black armor, crimson visors, emerged from the shadows, weapons raised. Down, Reed shouted, diving for cover. The corridor erupted in chaos, blaster fire lighting up the darkness. Lyra crouched behind a crate, shielding Yellow as Saris extended her hand. A surge of white energy burst from her palm, throwing 2 soldiers back like rag dolls. Reed fired at the third, hitting him square in the chest plate, sparks exploding as he fell. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the reactor. Reed stared at Saris, impressed. Not bad for someone who's been frozen 3 decades. She smirked faintly. Old habits die hard. Lyra approached cautiously. We need to hurry. They reached the final hatch, a heavy circular door sealed with multiple locks. Saris entered a code, and the mechanism groaned open, revealing a dark chamber filled with faint blue light. Inside sat a small vessel, sleek and dust-covered, but intact. Reed let out a low whistle. A stealth craft. Haven't seen one of these since the First War. Saris climbed aboard, her voice calm but urgent. It's functional. Get inside. I'll handle the launch sequence. As they strapped in, the roof above trembled violently, molten fragments raining down. Dominion ships roared overhead, weapons primed. Saris activated the controls, and the ship's engines came alive with a deep hum. The hatch began to close as she glanced at Lyra and Yellow one last time. Protect him, she said softly. He's not just your son anymore. He's the key to everything we lost. The stealth ship blasted upward through the crumbling outpost, breaking through clouds of dust and fire. Behind them, the moon erupted in a blinding explosion as the reactor overloaded. Reed looked out the viewport, watching the ruin fade into the void. Another world gone, he muttered. Lyra held Yellow close, whispering into his ear. But we're still here, my star. We're still here. Far behind them, in the burning debris of the moon, a single signal pulsed into the darkness. A message, encrypted and ancient, sent to a place beyond known space. And somewhere deep within the Dominion fleet, a voice answered. Activate the hunters. The Starborn has awakened. The Starborn rising. Stars streaked past the stealth ship like silver rain. The hum of the engines filled the silence, steady but strained. Captain Reed sat in the cockpit, eyes locked on the radar, watching faint red blips closing from behind. They're tracking us, he said quietly. Stealth mode won't hold much longer. Lyra sat in the rear cabin, holding Yellow against her chest, his tiny heartbeat pulsing softly beneath her palm. He hadn't spoken since they left the outpost, his glow faint but constant, like a dying ember refusing to fade. Dr. Saris stood nearby, studying the data core sheet saved, the faint blue holograms reflecting in her silver eyes. It's worse than I thought, she murmured. They weren't just building weapons. They were trying to shape evolution itself. Reed glanced over his shoulder. Meaning what exactly? Saris turned the hologram toward him, showing 2 intertwined energy signatures, one human, one Serenai, merging into light. The project aimed to create a new kind of life, something that could bridge the divide between species. But it required emotion, hope, compassion, love, and those cannot be engineered. Her gaze shifted to Yellow. Until him. Lyra brushed a strand of silver hair from her son's face, whispering, He's just a child. Saris shook her head gently. He's more than that. Lyra, he's what the ancient Serenai scriptures called the Starborn. A being born of 2 worlds, destined to restore balance where war has burned it away. Reed frowned. Balance? You mean peace? Saris looked out the viewport, the stars reflecting in her eyes. Yes, and the Dominion fears peace more than war. Because peace means they lose control. A sharp alarm cut through the moment. Reed's console lit up with red warnings. Incoming contacts, multiple. He cursed under his breath. Hunter ships. Fast, cloaked, and angry. The ship trembled as the first barrage struck their shields, shaking the cabin violently. Lyra cried out, clutching Yellow tighter. They found us. Reed gritted his teeth, pulling the ship into a hard dive, streaking through an asteroid field. Plasma fire flashed around them like storms of light. Saris braced herself against the wall, shouting, "We can't outfly them forever." Reed snapped back. "Then we make them regret following." He flipped a series of switches, releasing flare pods and decoys. The asteroids exploded with flashes of light, scattering the pursuing hunters, briefly. But the largest ship pushed through, black and sleek, bearing the Dominion's crimson insignia. It fired again, and the blast tore through the aft shields, sparks raining across the cockpit. Lyra cried out as Yellow stirred, his eyes flickering open, glowing brighter than ever before. The lights in the cabin began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Saris turned toward him, her expression filled with awe and fear. "Yellow, no, not yet. You'll burn yourself out." But the child's voice was calm, eerily steady. "They won't stop hurting people," he whispered. "They'll never stop." Reed's voice cracked over the intercom. "Lyra, whatever he's doing, make him stop." But Lyra could only hold her son as the air grew warm, vibrating with invisible power. The stars outside bent and twisted, colors bleeding into each other like liquid fire. Then Yellow lifted his hand, and the world seemed to hold its breath. A wave of silver light burst outward from the ship. Every hunter vessel caught in its path froze mid-flight, their engines silenced, their weapons dark. Then, one by one, they disintegrated into dust, the light unraveling them molecule by molecule. The void went still again. Only the faint hum of their ship remained. Yellow collapsed, unconscious once more, his glow fading to a soft shimmer. Lyra sobbed quietly, pressing her forehead against his. "You're safe now, my little star." Reed stared out the viewport, speechless. He wiped out an entire fleet. Saris nodded, tears in her eyes. "Not out of hate, Captain. Out of love." Silence lingered for a long time before Reed finally spoke. "So what now? We can't keep running forever." Saris placed the data core on the console, the hologram shifting to display a map of unknown space. "There's a place, the Sanctuary of Eos," she said softly. "A hidden Serenai temple, lost after the war. If the Starborn is to fulfill his purpose, that's where it begins." Lyra looked down at her son, whispering, "And if we go there?" Saris met her eyes. "Then he'll learn to control his gift, not be consumed by it." Reed sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Guess we've got a new destination." The ship drifted toward the distant light of a nebula, colors swirling like living fire. Lyra tucked Yellow beneath a blanket, her fingers brushing his small, glowing hand. Her heart was filled with both fear and wonder. Her child, the one she'd once thought doomed, was now hope itself. Reed smiled faintly as the engines hummed to life again. "Let's go find your destiny, kid," he murmured. Outside, the stars blazed brighter, as if watching. And far across the galaxy, within the Dominion's throne world, a shadowed figure rose from its seat, its voice cold and deliberate. "So, the Starborn lives. Then let him come, for light means nothing without the dark." The ship vanished into the glowing storm of the nebula, carrying with it a mother's love, a soldier's loyalty, and a child's light strong enough to change the stars themselves.